My name is Sarah, and I need to tell you about the day my mother-in-law looked me straight in the eye and told me that my husband's mistress was a better woman than I'd ever be. But before I get to that soul-crushing moment, before I tell you how those words became the catalyst for everything that came after, I need to take you back. Because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with a girl who learned way too young that love came with conditions and family loyalty had a price. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, in a house where appearances mattered more than truth. My mother, Linda, was the kind of woman who'd smile through anything as long as the neighbors didn't know. My father, Richard, was a mid-level manager at Ford who drank too much on weekends and had a temper that could turn a normal Tuesday into a nightmare. But we looked good on paper. Nice house in Dearborn. 2 cars in the driveway. Family vacations to Mackinac Island every summer where we'd take photos that suggested we were happy. I have an older sister, Michelle, who figured out early that the way to survive our family was to become exactly what our parents wanted. She married her high school boyfriend right after college, had 2 kids by 25, and never said a word that might rock the boat. She was the golden child, the one who did everything right. And then there was me. The one who asked too many questions. The one who noticed when things didn't add up. The one who called out my father when he'd come home drunk and start yelling, instead of just disappearing into my room like Michelle did. I remember being 12 years old, sitting at our kitchen table doing homework, when I heard my parents fighting upstairs. My father had been fired. Something about showing up late one too many times, something about his drinking. My mother was crying, begging him to think about the family, about what people would say. And my father was shouting about how nothing he did was ever good enough for her, how she was always worried about what the neighbors thought instead of supporting him. Michelle turned up her headphones and kept scrolling on her phone. But I couldn't tune it out. I sat there listening to my mother's voice get smaller and smaller until she was just apologizing. Apologizing for being upset that he'd lost another job. Apologizing for having feelings about it. Apologizing for existing, basically. The next morning my mother made pancakes like nothing had happened. My father sat at the table reading the newspaper, and when I asked if everything was okay, my mother gave me this tight smile and said, "Everything's fine, honey. Why wouldn't it be?" That's when I learned that in our family, we didn't talk about real things. We performed happiness and pretended the ugly stuff didn't exist. And if you broke that rule, if you insisted on acknowledging reality, you were the problem. By the time I was 16, I'd become the family scapegoat. When my father got fired from yet another job, it was because I'd stressed him out by asking to go to an out-of-state college. When my parents fought about money, it was because I was too expensive, too demanding, too much. Never mind that Michelle's wedding had cost $30,000 we didn't have. Never mind that my father spent hundreds a month at the bar. I was the convenient target. I got out the second I could. Got a full scholarship to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, moved into the dorms, and tried to build a life that didn't revolve around managing other people's emotions. I studied psychology because I wanted to understand what the hell had been wrong with my family. I wanted to know why some people stayed in dysfunction and others escaped. I met Jake during my senior year. I was 22, working at a campus coffee shop to make extra money, and he came in every morning before his construction management classes. He was older, 26, had done a few years in the army before using his GI Bill to go back to school. He had these warm hazel eyes and calloused hands and a straightforward way of talking that felt like fresh air after growing up in a house full of unspoken rules. We started dating, and for the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe. Jake didn't play games. He said what he meant. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when I talked about my screwed-up family and didn't try to minimize it or tell me I was being dramatic. He just said, "That sounds really hard. I'm sorry you went through that." His background was similar to mine in some ways. His dad had left when he was 10. His mom, Diane, had raised him and his younger brother in Flint, working 2 jobs and never quite having enough. He understood what it was like to grow up without much, to feel like you were always one crisis away from everything falling apart. But here's the thing I didn't see at the time. Jake wasn't close with his mom the way I thought he was. He talked about her like she was a saint who'd sacrificed everything for him. But when I actually met her, something felt off. The way she looked at me like she was sizing me up and finding me lacking. The way she'd make little comments about my clothes, my hair, my major. Psychology? That's nice, I guess. Not very practical though, is it? I brushed it off. Told myself she was just protective of her son, that she'd warm up to me once she got to know me. Classic mistake. Jake and I got married a year after graduation. I was 23, had just started my master's program in clinical social work, and Jake had gotten a good job with a commercial construction company. The wedding was small, nothing fancy, mostly because neither of us had money and both our families were broke. My parents came but complained the whole time about the venue and the food. Jake's mom cried during the ceremony, but not happy tears. More like funeral tears. Like she was mourning something. After the wedding, Jake's mom pulled me aside. I thought maybe she was going to say something nice, welcome me to the family, something like that. Instead, she looked at me with these cold eyes and said, "You better take good care of my son. He could have done a lot better, but he chose you. Don't make him regret it." I was so shocked I didn't even respond. Just stood there while she walked away, leaving me feeling like I'd been slapped. When I told Jake about it later, he laughed it off. "That's just how she is. She's protective. Don't take it personally." But it felt personal. Felt like a warning. And looking back now, it was. We moved into a small apartment in Warren, just outside Detroit. Jake was working long hours on construction sites, and I was juggling my graduate program with a part-time internship at a community mental health center. Money was tight, but we were managing. We had our struggles like any young couple, but nothing that felt insurmountable. Jake's mom visited often. Too often. She'd show up unannounced on weekends, let herself in with the spare key Jake had given her, and criticize everything about how I kept house. The dishes weren't done the way she'd do them. I bought the wrong brand of laundry detergent. I didn't cook enough, or I cooked too much and wasted food. Nothing I did was right in her eyes. And Jake never defended me. Never told his mom to back off or respect our space. He'd just shrug and say, "She means well. She's just trying to help." But it didn't feel like help. It felt like an invasion. It felt like she was trying to prove that I wasn't good enough for her son, that he'd made a mistake marrying me. I started dreading her visits. Started getting anxious every time my phone rang, worried it was her calling to announce she was coming over. I felt like a stranger in my own home, constantly being judged and found wanting. My friend from grad school, Amanda, noticed the change in me. We were studying together at a coffee shop one afternoon when I just broke down crying. Told her about Diane's constant criticism, about how Jake never stood up for me, about how I felt like I was failing at being a wife even though I was doing everything I could. Amanda, who'd been raised by a narcissistic mother and had done years of therapy, looked at me with such compassion and said, "Sarah, that's not normal. A mother-in-law who respects you doesn't act like that. And a husband who loves you doesn't let his mother treat you that way. You're not the problem here." But I didn't believe her. Not really. Because I'd spent my whole childhood being told I was the problem, and that pattern was so deeply ingrained that I couldn't see past it. If Diane didn't like me, if Jake didn't defend me, it must be because I wasn't good enough. I just needed to try harder. So I tried harder. I kept the apartment spotless. I cooked elaborate meals even though Jake usually wanted to just order pizza. I dressed nicer when I knew Diane was coming over. I bit my tongue when she made snide comments. I became smaller and quieter and more accommodating, thinking that if I could just figure out the right formula, she'd accept me and everything would be okay. It never was. No matter what I did, it was never enough. And the more I tried to please her, the more contempt she seemed to have for me. Like my eagerness to be accepted was just more proof of my inadequacy. Jake and I started fighting more. About his mom mostly, but also about other things. Money. His long hours at work. My long hours at school and my internship. The fact that we never had time for each other anymore. The fact that I felt lonely in my own marriage. "You're too sensitive," he'd say when I tried to talk about how his mom made me feel. "You take everything personally. Not everything is about you, Sarah." And I'd apologize. I'd apologize for having feelings, for wanting my husband to stand up for me, for expecting basic respect in my own home. I'd apologize because that's what I'd learned to do growing up. When you're the problem, you apologize. I finished my master's degree and got a job as a therapist at a practice in Royal Oak, working primarily with women dealing with anxiety and depression. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was helping other women set boundaries and recognize unhealthy patterns while completely failing to do that in my own life. Jake got promoted to project manager, which meant more money but even longer hours. He'd leave before sunrise and come home after dark, exhausted and irritable. We stopped having dinner together. Stopped talking about anything deeper than logistics. Stopped having sex more than once a month, and even that felt obligatory. I told myself this was just a phase. That once things settled down at his job, once we got more financially stable, once we figured out our rhythm, everything would get better. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true because the truth was too scary to face. The affair started about 3 years into our marriage. I didn't know it at the time, obviously, but looking back I can see the signs I ignored. Jake being extra secretive with his phone. Jake working late more often, but never having much to say about what he'd been working on. Jake being distant, distracted, like his mind was always somewhere else. I thought he was stressed about work. Thought he was tired. I thought he just needed support and patience and for me to stop being so needy. I didn't think he was sleeping with someone else. Not my Jake. Not the guy who'd seemed so honest and straightforward. Not the guy who'd promised to always be there for me. I found out on a Tuesday in March. I'd left work early because I had a migraine, came home expecting an empty apartment since Jake was supposed to be at a job site in Novi. Instead, I walked in to find him on our couch with a woman I'd never seen before. They weren't having sex, thank God, because I don't think I could have handled that image burned into my brain. But they were close, her hand on his thigh, his arm around her shoulders, and the look on both their faces when they saw me was pure guilt. "Sarah," Jake said, standing up so fast the woman nearly fell off the couch. "You're home early." That's what he led with. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This isn't what it looks like." Just a statement of fact, like I was the one who'd done something wrong by coming home to my own apartment. I stood there in the doorway, purse still over my shoulder, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman was pretty, younger than me, maybe 23 or 24, with long blonde hair and one of those faces that's all symmetry and proportion. She looked scared, like a kid caught doing something she knew was wrong. "Who is this?" I heard myself ask, my voice sounding weird and distant. "This is Kristen," Jake said, like that explained anything. "She works for one of our subcontractors. We were talking about a project." On our couch. With your arm around her. Talking about a project. The sarcasm in my voice seemed to piss him off. His face hardened. "Don't make this into something it's not, Sarah. Then tell me what it is." He couldn't. Or wouldn't. Just stood there looking at me like I was being unreasonable for asking questions. Kristen grabbed her jacket from the back of the couch. "I should go," she mumbled, not making eye contact with either of us. "Yeah," I said. "You should." He practically ran out of the apartment. The door clicked shut behind her and suddenly it was just me and Jake standing in our living room with the truth hanging in the air like smoke. "How long?" I asked. "Sarah." "How long, Jake?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing and now just made me want to scream. 6 months. Maybe 7. I don't know. Just happened. I didn't plan it. 6 months. More than half a year of lying to my face. More than half a year of coming home from being with her and getting into bed next to me. More than half a year of making me feel crazy for sensing something was wrong. "Are you in love with her?" He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer. "I don't know. Maybe. I'm confused, Sarah. I'm confused about everything." I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet, but definitely crack. "You're confused. That's great. That's really great, Jake. While you've been figuring out your feelings, I've been here working and coming home and trying to be a good wife while your mother tells me I'm not good enough and you never defend me. And apparently the whole time you've been with someone else. My mother has nothing to do with this. Your mother has everything to do with this. She's been telling you since day one that I'm not good enough for you and you believed her, didn't you? You bought into her bullshit and the second some pretty little thing gave you attention you decided she was right." He didn't deny it. Just looked at me with something like pity which was somehow worse than anger. "I think we need some space. I think I need time to figure out what I want." "What you want? What about what we promised each other? What about our marriage?" "I don't know if this marriage is working, Sarah. I don't know if it ever worked. Maybe we got married too young. Maybe we wanted different things. I don't know. But I need time to think." He left that night. Packed a bag and walked out, leaving me alone in an apartment that suddenly felt too big and too empty. I called Amanda and she came over immediately, brought wine and ice cream and just sat with me while I cried. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry. But sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't uncheat the cheater. Sorry didn't erase 6 months of lies. Sorry didn't answer the question that kept circling in my head. What was wrong with me that I wasn't enough?" Jake went to stay with his mom. Of course he did. And that's when things got really ugly. Because Diane didn't just let him stay there. She actively encouraged the affair. She told him he deserved better. She told him Kristen seemed like a sweet girl. She told him I was too dramatic, too demanding, too much work. I know this because Jake's brother Matt told me. Matt had always been kind to me, had always seemed embarrassed by his mother's behavior. He called me a few days after Jake moved out and said, "I think you should know what's going on. My mom is completely on Jake's side. She's been telling him he should divorce you and be with Kristen. She's been trashing you to anyone who'll listen. It's not right, Sarah. It's not okay." But knowing it and hearing it directly were two different things. The full force of Diane's hatred for me didn't become clear until I went to her house to try to get some of my belongings that Jake had taken. He wasn't there. It was just me and Diane standing in her kitchen while she made coffee like we were having a friendly chat. "I need to get some of my things," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Diane poured herself a cup, didn't offer me one. "Jake said you could come by this weekend when he's here. I'd rather not see him right now. Can you just tell me where he put my stuff?" She took a sip of her coffee, looking at me over the rim of her mug. And then she said the words that would change everything. "You know, Kristen is everything you're not. She's young, beautiful, easygoing. She doesn't nag. She doesn't complain. She makes Jake happy in ways you never could. Honestly, Sarah, you should be thanking her. She showed Jake what a real woman looks like. What a real relationship could be. You were never good enough for my son. I told him that from the beginning. I'm just glad he finally figured it out before you wasted any more of his time." I stood there in her kitchen and I swear I felt my soul leave my body. This woman who was supposed to be my family, who I'd tried so hard to please for 3 years, was standing there telling me that my husband's mistress was better than me. That I deserved to be cheated on. That I was the problem. And something in me shifted. Something fundamental and irreversible. Because in that moment I stopped trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. I stopped accepting the narrative that I was the villain in this story. In that moment, standing in Diane's kitchen while she calmly destroyed me, I realized I'd been accepting cruelty my whole life. From my parents. From my sister. From Diane. From Jake. I'd been accepting it because I'd been taught that love came with pain, that family meant tolerating abuse, that speaking up made you difficult. But I was done. I was done apologizing for existing. Done trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. Done being small and quiet and accommodating. I looked at Diane and said very calmly, "Thank you." She blinked, confused. "What?" "Thank you for finally saying out loud what you've been implying for 3 years. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Thank you for making it crystal clear that this family is toxic and I'm better off without all of you." I walked out of that house, got in my car and drove straight to a lawyer's office. I didn't cry. Didn't fall apart. I was done crying over people who didn't deserve my tears. I was ready to fight back. The lawyer's name was Patricia Rivera, and she came highly recommended by Amanda, who'd used her when she divorced her own nightmare of a husband. Patricia's office was in downtown Detroit, in one of those renovated historic buildings that made you feel like serious business happened there. I walked in on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days after Diane's kitchen declaration, with a notebook full of dates and details I'd started documenting the second I'd gotten home from that conversation. Patricia was in her mid-50s, had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad, her expression never changing even when I got to the part about what Diane had said. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "First thing I need to tell you is that what Diane said, while incredibly cruel, isn't legally relevant to your divorce. Michigan is a no-fault state, which means we don't need to prove wrongdoing to dissolve the marriage. The affair matters for your emotional healing, but it won't necessarily impact the settlement." My stomach dropped. "So there's no consequence for what he did?" I didn't say that. What I said is that Michigan law doesn't require us to prove fault. But the affair can absolutely factor into negotiations, especially if you can demonstrate that marital assets were used to fund it. Were there unexplained expenses? Hotels? Gifts? Restaurants you didn't go to together? I thought about it. I don't know. Jake handled most of our finances. We had a joint checking account for bills, but he had a separate account for his income that I didn't have access to. He said it was easier that way since he got paid irregularly on projects. Patricia made a note. That's a red flag. In a marriage, financial transparency is standard. Separate accounts aren't inherently problematic, but refusing to show you statements or explain spending is. We're going to need to subpoena his financial records. Bank statements, credit cards, everything. If he spent marital money on this affair, you're entitled to compensation for that. Over the next hour, Patricia walked me through the divorce process. What to expect, what to document, what to avoid doing. She told me to start gathering every piece of financial information I could access. She told me not to move out of the apartment, even though being there without Jake felt suffocating, because leaving could be interpreted as abandoning the marital home. She told me to stop communicating with Jake except through her, and absolutely do not engage with Diane under any circumstances. Your mother-in-law sounds like a piece of work, Patricia said. And my guess is she's going to try to insert herself into this divorce. Jake's probably going to use her as a sounding board, which means everything you say to him will get back to her and twist it. So all communication goes through me. No exceptions. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not hope that Jake would come back or that our marriage could be saved. Hope that maybe I could get through this with my dignity intact. Hope that maybe there was justice in the world after all. That night, I started going through our financial records with a fine-tooth comb. I logged into our joint checking account and downloaded 3 years of statements. I went through Jake's desk, looking for anything he might have left behind. Credit card statements, receipts, anything that might tell the story of his affair. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Starting about 8 months ago, there were regular cash withdrawals from our joint account. 500 here, 700 there. Sometimes 1,000. Always ATM withdrawals, always on days when Jake claimed to be working late. Over 8 months he'd pulled out nearly $15,000 in cash. $15,000 that came from both our paychecks. Money I'd earned seeing clients, helping people work through their trauma, while my husband was using it to fund his affair. I found hotel receipts tucked in his desk drawer. Weekend trips to Traverse City, to Chicago, to places we talked about going together but never had because he said we couldn't afford it. Except apparently we could afford it when it was for Kristen. I found charges to jewelry stores I'd never heard of. To fancy restaurants in downtown Detroit. To a lingerie boutique. That one made me physically sick. He was buying her lingerie with our money while I was shopping at Target for basics because we were supposedly on a budget. I documented everything. Took photos. Made spreadsheets. Cross-referenced dates with texts where he'd told me he was working late. Built a timeline of lies that was so detailed, so damning, that even Jake wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. Amanda came over most evenings to keep me company and help me go through records. She'd been through a divorce herself a few years back, so she knew what to look for, what mattered legally. You're doing great, she said one night, looking at my organized binders of evidence. Seriously, Sarah. A lot of people fall apart during this phase. But you're clear-headed and strategic. He's going to regret underestimating you. I don't want him to regret it, I said. I just want him to face consequences. I want him to acknowledge what he did instead of making me feel like I'm crazy for being hurt by it. He won't, Amanda said gently. People like Jake, people who cheat and lie and blame their partners, they don't suddenly develop self-awareness and accountability. He's going to keep playing the victim, keep insisting you're overreacting. That's why you have to focus on the legal side. Get what you're entitled to and get out. You can't make him be a better person. You can just protect yourself. He was right, of course. But it still hurt. It hurt that the man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, had turned out to be someone capable of such deliberate cruelty. Jake tried calling me a few times. I didn't answer. He texted saying we needed to talk, that we should handle this, like adults, without getting lawyers involved. I forwarded the messages to Patricia, who responded on my behalf with a formal letter informing him that all communication needed to go through her office. He didn't like that. He showed up at my apartment one evening, banging on the door, yelling about how I was being unreasonable and dramatic. I called the police. They came, told him to leave, filed a report. Patricia said that was good, that it established a pattern if he tried to claim I was the unstable one. Always document, she said. Every interaction, every message, every time he violates your boundaries. It all matters. Diane started calling me too. I blocked her number after the first voicemail. where she said I was ruining Jake's life and should be ashamed of myself for dragging out the divorce instead of quietly accepting that the marriage was over. The audacity was breathtaking. I was dragging it out. I was the one who'd found out my husband was cheating, who'd been told by my mother-in-law that the mistress was better than me, and I was the problem for wanting a fair divorce settlement? My own family wasn't much better. When I finally told my mother what was happening, she said, "Well, marriage is hard, honey. Maybe you two can work it out if you try couples counseling." He cheated on me, Mom. For 6 months. He lied to me constantly. His mother told me his mistress is better than me. Why would I try to work that out? I'm just saying, divorce is so final. And you're not getting any younger. It might be hard to find someone else. There it was. The same message I'd gotten my whole life. Don't make waves. Don't have standards. Accept whatever crumbs of love you can get because you're not valuable enough to deserve more. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than stay with someone who treats me like garbage, I said and hung up. Michelle called next, playing the peacemaker as always. Mom's just worried about you. We all are. Maybe you're being a little hasty. I mean, guys mess up sometimes. It doesn't mean the marriage has to end. Would you stay if your husband cheated on you? Silence. Then, that's different. How is it different? Because we have kids. Because we've built a life. You and Jake, you've only been married 3 years. You don't have as much invested. I wanted to scream. 3 years of my life wasn't enough to matter? 3 years of trying to be a good wife, of tolerating Diane's abuse, of building a home and a future, that didn't count as investment? I'm done with this conversation, I said. If you can't support me, then just don't say anything at all. I stopped calling my family after that. Stopped trying to get them to understand. They'd spent my whole childhood invalidating my feelings and minimizing my experiences. Why did I think they'd suddenly start now? The only family member who reached out with genuine support was Matt, Jake's younger brother. He called me a few weeks into the divorce process and said, "I'm sorry for what my brother did. I'm sorry for how my mom is acting. You didn't deserve any of this." "Thank you," I said, surprised by how much I needed to hear it. For what it's worth, I told Jake he's an idiot. I told him he threw away something real for something shiny and temporary. He didn't want to hear it. He's too busy playing victim and letting Mom tell him he's justified. How is he justifying it? Matt sighed. He says you two had problems. That you were distant, that you didn't make him feel appreciated, that the marriage was already failing. Mom backs him up, says she could see you weren't right for him from the beginning. They've got this whole narrative going where you're the villain who didn't give him what he needed, so he had no choice but to look elsewhere. The gaslighting was comprehensive. They were literally rewriting history, turning me into a neglectful wife who'd driven Jake into Kristen's arms. Never mind that I'd been working and coming home and trying to be everything to everyone. Never mind that Jake had never once expressed dissatisfaction until after he got caught cheating. "You know that's not true, right?" Matt said. "You were a good wife. Better than he deserved. This is all on him." "I know," I said. "But thank you for saying it. It helps to hear it from someone in his family." The divorce proceedings moved slowly like most legal things do. Patricia filed the petition, Jake hired a lawyer, we started the discovery process. Jake's attorney was exactly what I'd expected. Some slick guy in an expensive suit who specialized in protecting men's assets in divorces. His strategy became clear immediately. Minimize everything Jake had done, claim the marriage had been failing for years, argue that I wasn't entitled to much since I made my own income. Patricia tore that argument apart. She presented our financial records showing that Jake had spent $15,000 of marital funds on his affair. She presented the hotel receipts, the jewelry store charges, the restaurant bills. She demonstrated a pattern of financial misconduct that couldn't be explained away. Jake's lawyer tried to claim those were business expenses. Patricia asked why a construction project manager needed to buy lingerie and diamond earrings for business. Why he needed weekend trips to luxury hotels for business. Why all these business expenses happened on days when he told me he was working late at job sites. Jake had no good answers. His lawyer tried to muddy the waters, tried to make it about our relationship problems instead of his client's embezzlement of marital assets. But the numbers didn't lie. The receipts didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. We went to mediation in July, 4 months after I'd come home early and found Jake with Kristen. We sat in a conference room, Patricia and me on one side of the table, Jake and his lawyer on the other. I hadn't seen Jake in person since he'd moved out, and I was shocked by how different he looked. Smaller somehow. Or maybe I just saw him clearly now, without the rose-colored glasses of love distorting my vision. The mediator went through our assets. The apartment lease, which had 6 months remaining, our cars, both financed, our savings, which totaled about $28,000 after Jake had depleted it, our retirement accounts, and our shared possessions. Patricia laid out our position. I wanted half of all marital assets, plus compensation for the $15,000 Jake had spent on his affair, plus reimbursement for my half of the attorney fees since his misconduct had necessitated the divorce. Jake's lawyer called it vindictive and unrealistic. Said I was trying to punish Jake for the affair when Michigan was a no-fault state. It's not punishment, Patricia said calmly. It's restitution. Mr. Crawford spent marital funds on an extramarital affair. Ms. Crawford is entitled to be made whole. If he'd spent $15,000 gambling or buying himself a boat without telling her, she'd be entitled to the same compensation. The affair is just the context for the financial misconduct. We went back and forth for hours. Jake's lawyer tried to claim some of the expenses were legitimate, tried to argue that I couldn't prove the cash withdrawals went to Kristen. Patricia pulled out cell phone records showing Jake's location on the days of those withdrawals, showing he was near Kristen's apartment, not at job sites. By the end of the day, Jake's lawyer knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. They agreed to give me 60% of the marital assets, plus Jake would pay my attorney fees. It wasn't everything I'd asked for, but it was fair. More importantly, it was acknowledgement on paper in a legal document that Jake had done something wrong. As we were packing up, Jake asked if he could talk to me alone. Patricia immediately said no, but I surprised myself by saying yes. We stepped out into the hallway, and for a moment we just stood there, two people who'd promised to love each other forever and failed spectacularly. I'm sorry, he finally said. For all of it. For cheating, for lying, for letting my mom say those things to you. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I looked at him, this man I'd built a life with, and felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a kind of tired indifference. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? Was I really that terrible? No, he said, shaking his head. No, Sarah, you weren't terrible. You were great. That's the thing. You were so good, so perfect, always trying to please everyone, and it made me feel like a failure. Like I could never be good enough for you. So you cheated on me because I tried too hard? I cheated because I'm a coward. Because Kristen was easy and you were work. Not work in a bad way, just real. He swallowed. You wanted real conversations and real intimacy. You asked me to show up. And he exhaled like the air hurt. I wanted easy. I wanted to feel impressive without doing the work. There was not a justification, an admission. It didn't land like closure. It landed like paperwork. Noted, signed, filed. I accept the deal, I said. 60% fees covered, clean break. He nodded. Okay. I didn't hug him. Didn't cry. Patricia opened the conference room door, businesslike as ever. We signed the memorandum of understanding. The mediator stamped it. Facts moved forward whether feelings kept up or not. On the elevator down, the silence was strange. I could see our reflections in the chrome. Two people who'd once planned vacations around long weekends and coupons, now strangers with pens. In the lobby, Patricia squeezed my shoulder. Next steps. Formal decree, division logistics, then you're done. Done. The word felt new in my mouth. Not happy. Not sad. Thought. That night I did the most ordinary miracle I could think of. I cooked myself dinner. Not a performance dinner, not a please like me dinner. Just pasta with olive oil, garlic, red pepper flakes, and a handful of parsley I bought because I wanted it. I ate it at the small table with a glass of water and no apology. I texted Amanda a photo, signed. She sent back 3 confetti emojis and proud of you. Sleep if you can. The next morning a voicemail from Diane slipped through from an unknown number. I heard you bled my son dry. You should be ashamed. I saved it. Sent it to Patricia. Then I blocked the number. Not because I was afraid, because I was done. 2 weeks later the consent judgment was entered. I met the court clerk's eyes, took the certified copy, and walked out into a ridiculous blue sky day in downtown Detroit where people were buying hot dogs and arguing about the Tigers like the earth hadn't just shifted. I stood in the sun for 1 minute and let the light hit my face like a stamp. You belong to yourself again. That weekend Matt texted. Mom's spiraling. I'm sorry. If you need help moving anything, I'll show up. Thank you, I wrote. I'm okay. And I meant it. I had a plan with check boxes and a borrowed dolly and Amanda's hatchback waiting out front. My life fit into 12 boxes, a plant and a stubborn sense of humor. Before I left the apartment for good, I did one last lap. The couch where I found the truth. The counter where I stacked receipts like armor. The bedroom where I mistook quiet for peace. I opened the window, let the traffic noise flood in and said out loud, "You were my classroom. I graduate now." I locked the door behind me and dropped the keys at the leasing office without a speech. That night, in my new studio with the stubborn radiator and a second-hand rug, I put the certified decree in a clear sleeve in a blue folder. I labeled the spine in black marker. Proof. Then I put the folder on the highest shelf, not as an altar, not as a weapon, just as a tool I hoped I'd never need again. I slept the whole night through. No apologies. No rehearsed defenses. Just sleep. And in the morning, I woke up ready to write the part of the story that comes after the courtroom. If you've never had your life snap in half and keep walking anyway, here's what it looks like. You make a list. Not a manifesto. A grocery list for a nervous system. Mine said, laundry before 10 a.m. Walk around the block when the room tilts. Eat a vegetable. Text Amanda a bad meme. Pay the phone bill. Don't answer unknown numbers. Grief came at dumb times. Standing in the cereal aisle because Jake liked the Honey Bunches brand and suddenly my body forgot how to breathe. I wasn't crying about cereal. I was grieving the version of me who kept negotiating for crumbs. When it hit, I'd put a hand on the cart and narrate like a meteorologist. A passing storm. Low visibility. Seek shelter and facts. Then I'd buy the cereal I liked and call that a victory. Work steadied me. Therapy rooms are built for truth, and that was oxygen. I sat with clients while they tried to untangle the same knot I'd just wrestled. Am I crazy, or is this real? I never told them my details. I didn't need to. I knew the road by memory. You're not asking for too much, I'd say. You're asking for just enough. Sometimes saying it to someone else made it sink into me like learning by echo. Amanda instituted Tuesday soup. Every Tuesday she showed up with a Tupperware the size of a toddler and something delicious inside. Lentil. Chicken tortilla. Wild rice. We didn't gossip. We did email triage and stupid YouTube clips and walked around the block in coats that weren't enough for Michigan wind. Small life, she called it, grinning. The one that fits in your hands. I went back to church for 5 minutes, then left when the sermon on forgiveness tried to leapfrog accountability. I'm not against forgiveness. I'm against skipping steps. I took forgiveness on a long walk around the block and told it we could talk in a year. Money became practical instead of terrifying. Patricia put me in touch with a nonprofit financial counselor who said the sexiest 2 words I heard all year. Sinking funds. I made 3. Oh no, car stuff little joys. Putting $20 into little joys on Fridays felt like rebellion against everything Diane had taught me about a woman's worth being and how cheaply she could exist. Diane tried one more time via Facebook. She wrote a post vague enough to pass for manners and specific enough everyone knew it was about me. Some people take and take. You know the type. I didn't respond. Matt texted me a screenshot of his comment under hers. Not today, Mom. He messaged me privately, I got you. I stared at that for a long minute because loyalty that doesn't require additions feels like magic. On moving day for the things I'd left in storage, Matt showed up with coffee in his pickup. We carried boxes in rain that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. You don't have to take sides, I said, balancing a lamp under one arm. I'm not, he said. I'm just done pretending wrong is right because it's loud. We didn't look at each other, which is a Midwestern man's way of saying something intimate. Nights were hardest. That was when the what-ifs lined up like salesmen. I started a dumb ritual to block the door. Candle, cedar-scented. 3 lines in a notebook labeled today's evidence. Answered 2 hard emails without over-explaining. Took a walk when the panic knocked. Said no to a favor I didn't have the energy for. Sometimes the list was just, I ate and I showered. Sometimes that's the bar. Clearing it counts. About 2 months post-mediation I ran into Kristen. I know. You're already holding your breath. It wasn't cinematic. It was Target. Of course it was Target. She was in line with a throw pillow and a cart that looked like a dorm room. She saw me and froze. I didn't plan it. I just stepped forward and said, calm as a librarian, "Hi, Kristen." "Hi," she whispered, eyes shiny, shoulders up around her ears. "There's nothing to talk through," I said. "I'm not going to be cruel to you. And I'm not going to be your friend." She nodded, a fast, shaky little nod. "Okay. Take care of yourself." I meant it. I walked to self-checkout and bought dish soap like God intended. In the car I shook all over, then laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my body finally realized the tiger wasn't in the room. When the final decree arrived by mail, heavy paper too official for how quiet my studio felt, I didn't frame it. I filed it under proof and went for a run that looked a lot like walking. I set a playlist that had carried me through finals and breakups and said to my ankles, "Do your best." The sky did that late summer Detroit blue that forgives everything. That night I added one more line to my fridge list. Don't narrate your purchases. I caught myself doing it. It was on sale. I had a coupon. It's the generic, and laughed out loud. "It's okay to want the good olives, Sarah," I told the empty room. The room agreed. The last thing I did before bed was text Patricia. "Thank you for being the adult in the room when I couldn't." She replied, "You were the adult. I was just your paperwork." I slept with the window cracked and woke to birds and someone's far-off radio and a feeling I hadn't had since before I knew what gaslighting meant. Room. I wish I could tell you healing felt like fireworks. Felt like chores. First the phone. New number. Contacts re-added one by one on purpose. If I hesitated over a name, it didn't make the list. Then the locks. My landlord swapped them out, no drama. I returned the old set in a sandwich bag like evidence. The super laughed. "You're all right," he said. It felt like a benediction from a man who fixes radiators. Then the bank. New checking, new savings, alerts for anything over 50, freeze on my credit, text codes turned on. The banker, soft-voiced, precise, said, "You'd be surprised how many people do this after events." I said, "We can say the word. Divorce." She smiled like we'd acknowledged weather. I made a Sunday ritual to replace the dread. Tidy kitchen. Pay bills. Candle. 3 acts of care that were cheap and unheroic. Sat in the sun for 8 minutes. Ate lunch at a table, not a screen. Texted a friend first, not last. That last one changed the shape of my week. Work offered me an optional training I would have said yes to before just to prove I could. I said, "I'm going to pass this round." Karen, my supervisor, didn't blink. "Great. We'll catch the next one." My body didn't know what to do with approval that didn't demand acrobatics. I wrote it down in today's evidence. I said no. Nobody died. Amanda dragged me to a women's running group that is mostly walking and gossiping. We looped the park twice and solved nothing and everything. A woman named Priya taught me how to breathe when a hill arrived. In for 4, out for 6. Lie to your legs if you have to. I applied that to email too. Every room in my studio got one small thing that was only for delight. A pothose named Proof, a yellow mug, a print that says boundaries are kindness in a font that makes you think of diners. I didn't post them anywhere. I didn't need an audience. The room was the audience, and it gave me a standing ovation for making my bed 3 days in a row. Diane tried to weaponize holidays. A Thanksgiving group text went out to a number I didn't recognize. Family dinner at 4. "Sarah, if you're done punishing everyone, you can come say sorry and move on." I replied to the group with a single line. "Please remove me from this thread. All future contact through counsel." Then I took myself to the movies with a smuggled Tupperware of Amanda's stuffing and cried at a preview for a dog film like I had stock in the dog. In January, the tire pressure light came on. Old me would have turned it into a parable about how I can't have nice things. New me drove to the gas station, fed quarters into a machine that sounded like a dragon with asthma, and asked the guy at pump 3, "Can you show me how to do this without blowing us up?" He did kindly. When the light went off, I whispered to nobody, "Look at us, functioning." There were setbacks. A surprise bill. A dream where I was back at Diane's kitchen table explaining the price of cilantro while she polished a halo. Twice I caught myself composing a monologue I'd never deliver. When that happened, I set a timer for 90 seconds and let the speech gallop. When it dinged, I wrote one sentence. I choose silence that isn't suppression. It's stewardship. Then I went and did the dishes because a clean sink is a kind of prayer. Matt got engaged. He called to tell me before the family group chat exploded. "She's great. You'd like her." "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. He hesitated. Well, Mom. You don't owe me a play-by-play. I just want you to know not everybody bought her version. I know. The relief in my own voice surprised me. Thank you for not letting loud be the same as true. Spring in Michigan is a rumor, but then the crocuses bully their way through and you have to believe them. I planted herbs in a window box. Basil, mint, parsley because I could. I made a dumb rule. If I was mean to myself, I had to water something. My plants have never been so hydrated. Around the 1-year mark, Jake emailed. Subject line, amends. The body was responsible, therapy scented. He said he'd started counseling. He said his relationship with Kristen had ended. He said he was trying to understand why he used people's devotion as a cushion. He said if I ever wanted to talk, he'd listen. I didn't. But I did forward the email to myself with the subject line proof of growth, his, maybe mine, and filed it. Then I made pesto with my basil and ate it on toast and called it a sacrament. I kept a short list on the fridge. Tell myself the truth. Guard my peace. Choose connection over performance. Feed my body and my hope. Don't narrate my purchases. I added one more. Leave rooms that require you to disappear. I taped it next to a photo of 12 women laughing at nothing on a Tuesday. That's the thing nobody tells you. The small life is actually the big one once you stop performing for people who grade you. One night, I passed our old apartment building on my way home. The window of what used to be our place was open. Someone inside was arguing about takeout menus, the normal kind of argument that doesn't turn into a referendum on a person's worth. I stood on the sidewalk a minute, hand in my pocket around my keys, and gave the past a nod. Thank you for the education, I said. Then I went home to my studio, my plant named Proof, my quiet that I earned. I don't wake up brave every day. I wake up and do the next kind thing. Sometimes the kindest thing is coffee. Sometimes it's deleting a draft. Sometimes it's texting Amanda, tell me a dumb thing, and getting back a photo of her cat sitting like a man. I kept going to therapy, not as a clinician, as a person. My therapist, Dr. Chen, has this calm way of asking questions that feel like someone opening a window. What does safety feel like in your body? She asked. I said, like exhale. She said, build your day around earning that. So I do. I stack small exhale moments on purpose. The first sip, the walk to the bus, the way the sun hits the brick on Cass Avenue at 4:30 p.m. I started a group at the practice. Nothing formal, just a monthly circle for women disentangling from control. We drink terrible coffee and trade scripts. My favorite is the 5-word boundary. That doesn't work for me. We practice saying it with different eyebrows until it fits. Work grew in a way that didn't eat me. A supervisor track opened. I had the credentials and the trauma not to need the title. I asked for a trial period instead of a crown, and guess what? Leadership that doesn't require martyrdom is just mentorship with a better calendar. I like it. I run now. I jog and occasionally bargain. But my feet have learned a route along the river where the city forgives itself. Once a week I go at sunset. The water looks like spilled tinfoil, and for 20 minutes I am exactly one animal moving. Random kindness found me. The barista who remembers I like the ugly mug. The neighbor who brings up my package so it won't sit in the lobby. The kid on the bus who offered me his seat even though I'm not old. I took it anyway and let him be heroic. I started saying, thank you, like it was free. Because it is. I saw Diane one more time. Not planned. Farmer's market. She was at a honey stall lecturing a teenager about the superiority of clover. Our eyes met. The air shifted and then, nothing dramatic. I held her gaze for a heartbeat, not angry, not soft. Just factual. She looked away first. I walked on. I bought tomatoes that tasted like August and didn't write a monologue about it later. That's recovery. Not every moment is an arena. Matt and his fiancée, Lena, asked me to read something at their wedding. Not about love, Lena said, laughing. About choosing each other every Tuesday. I read a Mary Oliver line about attention being devotion and made half the room cry. Diane dabbed her eyes with a lace hanky and never spoke to me. I didn't need her to. On the anniversary of the day Diane told me Kristen was better, I took myself to the Detroit Institute of Arts. I stood in front of a painting I didn't understand and let it be mysterious without making it my fault. I wrote one line in my phone. I no longer audition for roles I didn't write. Then I bought myself museum store earrings that catch the light like a wink. I didn't narrate the price to anyone. Jake sent one more email months later. He wanted to return a book of mine he found. The body keeps the score. But I told him to donate it to the library. He replied, I hope you're well. I didn't answer. I was. So here's the part where I talk to the version of you who's still in someone else's kitchen being told you're the problem. You're not dramatic for wanting respect. You're not too sensitive for having a nervous system that notices storms. You're not asking for luxury when you ask for transparency with money, kindness with tone, and safety at home. Those are basics. If you're inventorying your worth against a third party, an affair partner, a mother-in-law's fantasy, a chorus of neighbors, put down the calculator. Walk toward facts. Facts like where the money goes, who holds the keys, whether your body unclenches when the door opens. Start small. A list on the fridge. A folder named proof. An email you send to yourself to timestamp the truth. A sentence you practice until it fits your mouth. That doesn't work for me. A friend who will sit on your floor and watch dumb videos until the panic gets bored. I won't pretend there's a bow. There's maintenance. There's you building a life boring enough to be sustainable and bright enough to be yours. Some days you'll feel like a hero for unloading the dishwasher. Some days you'll be the kind of brave that doesn't look good on camera. The kind where you leave a room that demands your silence and you do it without slamming the door. My name is Sarah. My mother-in-law once told me my husband's mistress was better than me. He was wrong. Not because I'm better than anyone, but because comparison is a game you only win by refusing to play. I make soup on Tuesdays. I water a plant named Proof. I run badly and I keep going. I buy the good olives. I tell the truth in rooms that can hold it. I sleep with the window cracked. And when the wind moves the curtain just right, I remember the girl who thought love meant disappearing. And I tell her out loud so she can finally believe me, we're allowed to take up space.